In the quiet town of Port Charles, where secrets fester just beneath the surface and heartbreak often arrives uninvited, tragedy struck in a way no one saw coming. It began as an ordinary morning inside the Corinthos family's private nursery, an insulated haven within the Quartermain estate trailer, where Sasha tended to her infant daughter, Daisy Celeste. The room, decorated in soft pastels and scattered with plush toys, had become Sasha's sacred space, a place she associated with healing, purpose, and an almost fragile sense of peace after enduring so much loss. But peace is fleeting in Port Charles. And on this particular day, as Sasha stepped away momentarily, perhaps to warm a bottle or retrieve a blanket, the unthinkable happened. Daisy vanished. Gone without a trace. The realization was instantaneous and primal. One moment, Sasha was humming softly to herself, and the next, her voice turned into a guttural scream that shattered the silence and echoed down the corridor. Her daughter's name, Daisy, rang out like an alarm through the trailer. The crib was empty. No note. No indication of who had taken the child. Just the sickening absence of the tiny body Sasha had carried, birthed, and cherished. Panic propelled her out the door, where she collided with Michael, Daisy's father, standing bewildered in the hallway. The look in Sasha's eyes told him everything. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. Their baby had been taken. The shockwave from Daisy's disappearance pulsed far beyond Sasha and Michael. It rocked the Quartermain household to its core, sent ripples through General Hospital, and reached every corner of Port Charles. Yet as the police were summoned and a citywide search began, the truth was far more chilling than anyone dared imagine. Someone had been watching Daisy since the moment she entered the world. Someone patient, calculating, and emotionally driven. This wasn't a random act, it was personal. The seeds of this tragedy had been planted weeks earlier when Sasha gave birth under chaotic circumstances in the courtroom during her testimony at Willow and Michael's explosive custody trial. As Willow watched from the defendant's table, helpless and seething, Sasha went into labor right there on the stand. And despite everything, it was Willow, the woman whose maternal rights had just been legally stripped, who delivered the child she believed should have been hers. In the days that followed, General Hospital suffered a curious mistake. The wrong baby was wheeled into Sasha's recovery room. The nurse apologized. A paperwork error, she claimed. But Sasha remembered the strange look in the nurse's eyes, the subtle hesitation before placing the infant in her arms. That brief moment was dismissed at the time, but now it was impossible to ignore. Had someone been testing the waters? A dry run for a far more sinister plan? Whispers began to swirl in the hospital hallways. Theories turned to accusations, and fingers pointed, largely at Willow. Once the town's golden-hearted teacher and nurse, Willow had suffered a terrifying breakdown after losing custody of Wiley and Amelia. Her grief had twisted into something sharp and unpredictable. She'd stopped showing up for shifts, reportedly roamed the halls at night, and had been caught more than once standing outside the nursery, watching Daisy through the glass with an expression no one could quite interpret. Was it longing? Obsession? A fracture in her identity? There was growing concern among her former colleagues that Willow might be suffering from dissociative identity disorder, splintering into someone else entirely during her episodes of despair. If so, she might not even realize what she had done. It would explain her gaps in memory, her increasingly erratic behavior, and her cryptic statements about motherhood and justice. The notion that she might see herself not as a kidnapper, but as a rescuer, made the possibility all the more terrifying. But Willow wasn't the only person under scrutiny. Port Charles had never been short on enemies, especially for someone like Sasha. Her past as a con artist, drug addict, and public figure had left her vulnerable to retribution. Rumors resurfaced about former adversaries who might want to punish her, or who harbored deep grudges tied to the crimes and manipulations of years past. One name emerged with chilling frequency: Jen Sidwell. Sidwell had never forgiven Holly for deceiving him and using his influence for her own ends. But Holly's betrayal wasn't his only grievance. Daisy, as Holly's niece, may have been the collateral damage in a revenge plot orchestrated with surgical precision. Sidwell, known for his network of mercenaries and under-the-radar operations, could have orchestrated the kidnapping to inflict emotional devastation on Holly, and in doing so, on Sasha. If he couldn't reach Holly directly, hurting those she loved would be the next best thing. Yet even that theory didn't explain everything. There was no ransom demand. No public statement. No message sent through back channels. Whoever took Daisy wasn't in it for money or leverage, they were in it for the child herself. Which brought the narrative full circle, right back to Willow. As investigators combed through security footage and Michael mobilized private teams through ELQ connections and Sonny's remnants of the old network, another clue emerged. A staff member at the hospital reported seeing a woman matching Willow's description in the lower parking garage, holding what looked like a bundled infant just minutes before the Amber Alert was issued. The footage was grainy. The timestamp ambiguous. But it was enough to convince Anna and Jordan that Willow needed to be questioned, immediately. At the same time, Sasha began to unravel. Her grief over losing Liam, her past battles with addiction and depression, and now the disappearance of Daisy pushed her to the brink. She blamed herself for letting her guard down. Blamed Michael for dragging her back into the chaos of the Corinthos family. Blamed the world for its cruelty. But most of all, she feared that her daughter might never come back, that Daisy would grow up believing someone else was her mother, her world redefined by deception before she could even speak. Michael, to his credit, remained composed but quietly seething. He knew the stakes. He also knew how many enemies his family had made over the years. He turned to Jason for help, quietly reactivated old contacts, demanded favors, dug into medical records, surveillance, digital footprints. If Daisy was still alive, Michael would find her. No matter what it cost. Elsewhere, Willow's spiral deepened. She disappeared for nearly 24 hours after the news broke, sending panic through her inner circle. When she resurfaced, she was disoriented and barefoot, found walking along the cliffs near Spoon Island. Her arms were scratched, and her clothes soaked through. She claimed to have no memory of how she got there. Doctors rushed to sedate her, but by then, the damage was done. She became the prime suspect, not only in the eyes of the public but within her own family. Still, some weren't convinced. Brooke Lynn, for one, believed something didn't add up. Why take Daisy and then vanish into the wilderness? Why not keep the baby close if Willow truly believed she was reclaiming motherhood? And what of the odd phone call Sasha received just before the kidnapping, an untraceable number, no voice on the line, just the faint sound of a lullaby playing in the background? This case, it seemed, had layers far deeper than anyone realized. A web of emotional trauma, buried secrets, psychological collapse, and hidden vendettas. As the search widened to the surrounding counties, and federal resources were pulled in, Port Charles found itself paralyzed. Every parent clutched their children tighter. Every friend looked sideways at their neighbors. The illusion of safety had been shattered. But one thing remained certain: Daisy's disappearance was no accident. And as Michael, Sasha, Anna, and Jason closed in on the truth, whatever it might be, they knew that the final revelation could destroy everything they thought they knew about the people they loved. Somewhere, Daisy was out there. Waiting. Alone. Or perhaps, not alone at all.